Hoping everybody's day is off to a great start. In this episode, I do want to highlight two different things. I want to highlight how to use an 8-point grid and specifically how you could code that out. And I also want to talk about using the array method .map or the map array method in your React app and how you could just make it easier for you instead of using a for loop. First thing I would want to mention is the 8-point grid. What you see on the screen is a mock of a job list, and so we have two list items of just specific jobs by different companies. And for this one, it just says a Google job and a Facebook job of a junior UI UX designer and a senior software engineer for Google. What we're going to be doing in the project is looping through an array of data and listing them out in our React project. So you'll have specific data and you'll create this mock here and just list out 4 different items. The reason why I'm showing you the Adobe XD project is because I want to talk about how to use an 8-point grid. So in the first one I have here is just a wireframe of what our list items should look like. So they should contain the company logo, the title, and then the company name, and then the 8 days ago, which represents when it was posted, and then the location, which is Mountain View, California. And so this data right here is dynamic and we'll be pulling that in, but everything else should stay the same as far as the looks, and it should just repeat over and over and over. That's where the map array method comes in, and it allows us just to loop in data and pretty much display it out on the screen. Now, what I mean by using an 8-point grid, we're simply using multiples of 8 to define dimensions, paddings, margins of elements on the screen. Image right here is 40 by 40, which is a multiple of 8. The padding around it is 16 pixels, which is a multiple of 8, and you could see that pretty much play an effect for each element that we have on the screen. The title is 24 pixels height, and the company name is 8 pixels high, and the margins between these two is 8 pixels, and the same padding of our container is 16 pixels top and 16 pixels bottom, and same goes for the location and the date that was posted. 40 pixels to the actual row and 16 pixels below, padding bottom, sorry, can't even speak, and from the location to the day it was posted is 16 pixels. So you see that it's all a multiple of 8. Now the reason a lot of people like to use this 8-point grid is because it makes it easy for us to kind of define the margins and the paddings and just overall sizing, and just makes it very consistent when designing a design system or creating a UI for any project that you come across. And so when it comes to designing, when you actually put in the data, the issue we face is sometimes the fonts like to add a bit of padding or line height to them, even if you change the line height, even if I've set it to 24 pixels, depending on how the font was created. I'm not sure if you could change this. I know we can kind of just change it to a text area and adjust the height to make it pixel perfect to 24 pixels, and that makes it work for the height. But overall, it's just a little pain in the ass, and when you go out and code it, you could just specify the line height. And so you might be off by a pixel or two when actually designing the final result, but that's really fine. Just as long as you understand when you actually code whatever it is that you designed, you specifically use that 8-point grid. It looks beautiful and is consistent throughout the entire project. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the code and design this project out. Now I am running a basic Create React app. The only thing that's different is, let me pull out the projects file or the project structure. It is a Create React app. I am using Sass for my CSS. Like I said, you could just install a Sass dependency and then change the file name from .css to .scss. And we also created a components folder, a data folder, and an assets folder. Assets folder is just containing the Facebook, Google, Medium, Netflix images, which is the company logos. And the components folder, we have a job.js, which is that job row. We're going to design everything in there, and I'll get to that in a second. The data is pretty much just the data. So it is a jobs available data, and it's got an ID, a company, a title, location, and data posted. So these are the objects that we'll be fetching to display specific dynamic data. We are importing the jobs component, and the job.js is, I've already got the structure laid out. What's happening is that there's just a job row, a job inner regarding padding, the div for company logo, and then in the image we are first pulling in the Google image, And then we have another div, which is the job description. And in the job description is that position and a company name for Google and senior software engineer. I do have these backwards, so let's actually fix that. It shouldn't be company name here. Company name should be up here, and the position should be down here. So position, software engineer, and then the job misc or miscellaneous is the date and the location. So the 8 days ago in the Mountain View, California. This is just basic JS6. I didn't want to necessarily code it out to take up too much of your time. In the Sass file, we have our variables, which are pulled in from our Adobe XD project that we created. And these are just variables for colors. We are setting a padding of 0, margin of 0, and box sizing border box, as well as using the Avenir font with an Apple system fallback. And then as pretty much you just get all these fallbacks if one font doesn't work. So what we have already is just a .main, which is in the app.js. We have a .main.container, and all I'm doing here is just centering our items and then just adding a container and just fixing the width. So all this is very simple stuff. It's not really all that necessary to actually know. If you do want to follow along, just go ahead and pause this video and copy it, or go ahead and check the description to get the starter files, and then you can just roll with us. So if you go ahead and clone the project and run it, all you need to do is just clone it and then npm run start. It's just a basic React app. You will have this screen here, and so there's no styling. It's just one set of static data. We are going to change this to dynamic data and list out all the projects. That's the whole purpose of this. Now, depending on the developer that you are, you might want to loop in the data first, make sure everything's good, and then style it. Or you could go ahead and style it and then loop in the data. In this case, since we do want to focus more on UI design when focusing on our front-end development projects, I'm going to go ahead and style our project and then loop in the rest of the data. So everything is going to be static, and then at the end, we'll add in the .map. Okay, so first let's go ahead and jump into the styling. We are going to be referencing our Adobe XD project a lot, and we'll just go back and forth with the Adobe XD project and the code itself. What I like to do is just split these two screens with the .scss and then the job.js. I'm going to nest everything first, and then I'm going to just focus on the styles. So in the container that we have on our app.js, we see that they have container, and then nested inside that is job-container. So what I can go ahead and do is just nest all the elements first. That way I don't have to go back and forth with the JS files and the CSS or the Sass files. So we're pretty much done with the app.js for now. And in here we've got the job-row, and I'm going to speed this up. All I'm doing is just nesting everything inside in our Sass file so that we can just focus on styling. So let's go ahead and style this. I'm going to go a little quicker than usual, but I'll explain along and do my best to make sense of everything. So the job-container is going to have a border, which is going to hold every single item that we listed. So we can just go ahead and send a border with 1 pixel, have it be solid, and we can always reference back to our colors. And what the border is going to be is just a $border variable. The width is going to be 600 pixels, similar to what we have in our XD project, and that's going to do it just for the container. The rows itself is going to have a width of 100%, which will equal to be the parent element's width, so it's 600 pixels. And the background, we want to set the background color different than the background color of our project, so it's going to be job-bg. And we also want to set a border bottom of 1 pixel, solid, and the border color. What the border bottom represents for each job row is, this would be a job row, right? The border bottom is this bottom line here. We could go ahead and just attach a pseudo element and attach a border to each one, but in this case, since we are just going to make things easy on us, we are just going to attach a border bottom. And for our last child, we are going to remove the border bottom, since our container, which is the entire list, is going to have a border itself. So we do not want to double border the bottom part, and it just looks a little thicker than each border. And one thing also is, a lot of times when you're listing things out, you do want to use a UL and an LI, but in this case I'm not going to do that. There isn't a particular reason, but I do recommend, if you ever do this project, just go ahead and use the UL and LI, because it'll make a little more sense. Now the height of our rows is going to be 72 pixels. And the padding all around each section, top, bottom, right, and left, is going to be 16 pixels. And these 16 pixels and 72 pixels does come from our project. So the height of a row is 72 pixels, and the padding around each one is 16 pixels, except in this case, if we look at the wireframe, 16 pixels here, 16 pixels here, 16 pixels all around. So we need to stick with that 8-point grid layout that we decided to go with. Now, I did mention our last row does not need a bottom border, so what we could do is just do a last child. If I can get this going, a last child, and then just put bottom, border dash bottom none, and that will remove a border off the bottom. If we look at our project so far, we do have the row created, but the elements have not been inside the row, the image hasn't been sized correctly, and we'll get to that point. So the job inner represents each element inside that row, and what we're going to use is Flexbox. So we could just say display flex, and we want to justify the content of each element, add a space between, and then we also want to align each item to the center. And so this will align every single item nested inside the job inner, and it'll align it center to each other. So if we save this and look at our project, we can see that everything is aligned perfectly into the center. And as far as margins in the 8-point grid, we will add that and it will still look as perfect as the mock that we designed. The company logo is going to have a width and a height of 40 pixels, similar to our mock. And this is very important that we make sure our code in our mock is perfectly together, because a lot of times, especially in a professional environment, you'll tend to see front-end developers just kind of estimate and get it as close as possible, and that tends to upset a lot of designers. So always make sure you try to do it pixel perfect as much as possible. Finally, the job description is going to have a width of 240 pixels, and what the job description was the senior software engineer and junior UI UX designer. The job description is going to be 240 pixels. Next, we have the company name, and the company name is going to have a font size of 14 pixels, a line height of 14 pixels, and also the color is going to be set to that secondary color we have, since the company name isn't as prominent, especially when we're displaying the company logo, and a lot of these companies already have notable logos, so we could just set the color to secondary. And then the margin bottom is what we're talking about with the 8-point grid. So we're going to select 8 pixels margin bottom. So our position is then going to have a font size. I need to get better at typing. Font size of 18 pixels and a line height of 18 pixels. And the color is going to be that text color, with the font weight being 700. This makes it the most prominent element on our screen, and it's easy for users to see when they look at it. So we've got the logo and we've got the company name and the senior software engineer, or the title, perfectly lined up, and it looks good. The only thing that we need to do next is fix the 8 days ago in the Mountain View, California. So let's go ahead and do that. We have the job miscellaneous, and what we're going to do here is just add a text align right, so that we could align the text for both date and location to the right. And then finally, in the date, what we need to do is add a display block first. Now, the reason we're adding display block is because both these items are span tags, and span tags come inline. So now that we have them as display blocks, they give it their own row, and then they become pretty much stacked on top of each other. So the date is going to have a line height of 12 pixels and a font size of 12 pixels. The color will be secondary, and the font weight is going to be set at 300. The date posted isn't as important to us, so we could just have it a font weight of 300 and the color secondary. And finally, the margin bottom is going to be set to, what did we have here? I think 16 pixels. Yes. So the margin bottom is going to be set at 16 pixels. And then finally, for the location, it's going to be very similar. We need to add that display block as well. The width of the location will be set to 120 pixels. The color is secondary also. And what we could do is just add color secondary to our job dash misc, and that will apply to both. But in this case, we're just going to have that color for both. The font weight is 600, since we want our location to kind of be popping a little more than the date posted. And finally, the line height and the font size will both be set to 12 pixels. And if we take a look at our final project, we can see that everything is kind of aligned pretty much perfectly. Sometimes depending on the font that you're using, they might give you a height. So in this case, we want our position to be a perfect height of 18. But what it gave us was 240 pixels and then a 17.6 for height, even though we assigned the line height to be 18 pixels and the font weight to be 18 pixels. Some fonts might bug with you and do that, but the easy way to fix that is just tell it that you want the height to be 18 pixels. So if we just say we want the height to be 18 pixels, it will make sure that the height is set to 18 pixels. This is something that is somewhat important, especially if you're working at a company that emphasizes on design. You want to make sure that your code is pixel perfect to the mock, and designers will love you, and trust me, this will set you above and beyond other developers when you are coding out pixel perfect design mocks. Now the next thing with this video is to use that map array method in this project so that we could loop in different data and list out 4 different jobs. If you're interested in that, click on the next video, which is part 2, and we'll use the map array method. If you've enjoyed part 1, please go ahead and leave a like, that'll truly help me out, and don't forget to subscribe for more content. I'll see you in the next video.